Okay, so this is part 3, and we're going to be focusing on Kamala's birth chart. And I have to point out again that it didn't even occur to me to do her birth chart until I had done the entire analysis of her horary chart. And then I thought, gee, maybe I should take a look at her birth chart. And when I did, it was a real shock on so many levels. And we're going to go through that. We're going to show how it kind of messes up the fact that, well, yeah, let's just start with the 10th house. Okay, the 10th house is right up here between what would be somewhere between midnight and 12:30, and that big strong arrow up there, with the arrowhead, that's the cusp of her 10th house. The 10th house is to the left of it. It's in the sign of Pisces. And I apologize, but I had to pull up this chart because this is a free chart. I do not have my astrology software bit the dust when my Mac was hacked a few years ago, right after I started making videos, and I have not been able to replace it. So I've had to use free charts. There is a chart out there that shows Kamala's birth chart, which you can go and just Google and look up. And you will see that in other people's charts, there is the planet Chiron.
Mhm.
And Chiron is at 14 degrees Pisces, and it resides in her 10th house of the presidency. And Chiron represents the wounded healer, which means that the only thing she's got in the 10th house of the presidency is being wounded. And just to show you the difference between someone who just has a wound in their house of presidency and a person who is clearly meant to be president, we're going to show you Donald Trump's chart. So you can see the difference. And it will prove to you beyond a shadow of a doubt that this man is meant to be president, has been president, is president, and will be president. And he will win this election one way or another. He's going to, no matter how they fight him for it, he will finally end up being victorious. It has to be, as you'll see in his chart. Okay, so let's look at his 10th house of the presidency. Again, it is to the left of that arrow at the top. And the first thing we see in the house of presidency is his sun. That's the circle with the dot in it. And his sun is at 22 degrees Gemini. And the sun represents I am. Well, yeah, he is president. And then right near it is the X that's kind of mangled to the right of it. Yep. And that's the planet of Uranus. And you'll notice it's at 17 degrees, that magic number. And Uranus actually was discovered at the time of the American Revolution. And in the House of the Presidency, it definitely represents we the people, the Constitution, the founding of the United States via our revolution. And it's within 5 degrees of Trump's sun. And in between the planet Uranus and his sun is that which looks like headphones. That's the north node of destiny. That is where one's fated to end up. That is what one's fated to for their destiny to take them. And it is right between, smack between his sun and the planet, we the people. It connects them. His destiny is right there. And it is just astounding to me that that is so accurate in representing Trump as president. Okay, so let's go back to Kamala's chart.
Mhm. I'd like to also say his chart is a lot more organized. He has a lot more direction. He knows his purpose. He knows why he's here.
Well, that's true. I mean, he's got a lot of planets above the horizon. The the axis of 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock is the horizon. And he has a lot of planets above it, which means he's actually there, for people to see. He's not hiding. He's not in a dark place. He's got a lot of good planets in his house of friends. He's got planets in the house of presidency. He does have Mars in Leo conjunct his ascendant, which, well, there you go. There's his love of acting and his love of being seen in public and his ego. Leo rules egos, and he has a lot of ego energy. It's also, he has a lot of energy, which is Mars conjunct his ascendant. And he's a lot of people have trouble dealing with his ego. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest complaints about him. But I would like to point out the fact that without that ego, how could he ever deal with the things he has to deal with, like Putin and Xi Jinping? I mean, he's got the strength of ego to be able to deal with those guys. And there's nobody else that has that same ego. I mean, you take RFK Jr., who's a genius at running this country and fixing everything that needs to be fixed about the United States of America. And then you have Tulsi Gabbard, who's like, the perfect person to be dealing with the military because she is military and she's really smart about strategy and really smart about all the things that the military represents. And then you've got Trump with his extraordinary strength of business sense and ego. And that is what you need to deal with the rest of Earth, the rest of the planet.
And
So
all the other world leaders.
yeah, it's an extraordinary team.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I mean, it gives me goosebumps to think about it. It is such an extraordinary team. And it's perfect for what we're about to go through with Ascension. It actually, and it's also the only hope we have actually for dealing with the people that have derangement syndrome because they are under a spell. And we need to try in every way possible to get through to them before we go through Ascension. And I know that the bad guys are doing everything they can to stop that from happening because they're kind of gnarly pains in the asses, but they can't stop it. It's going to happen. It's like birth. Our planet's going to go through birth. It's going to go to a higher density, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. And we just want to make sure that we kind of try to bring along our friends and family whom we love, who are right now going crazy, pulling their hair out because they hate Trump so much.
Mhm. And they don't even know why. A
Yeah,
lot
they
of
don't, you mention his name and they just start going crazy.
Yeah. I also feel when you brought up the word spell, like I feel there's been a lot of spells put in media to brainwash people to think one way or another. A lot
Yeah,
of the media has been against Trump from the start. You
yeah.
know, you recently we saw Elon Musk get out there and say, "Well, there's no point in assassinating Kamala because she can be replaced by a puppet, but Trump cannot be replaced."
It's a good point. Um,
Puppet.
yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
I was going to say that, oh, actually, I just forgot what I was going to say. Drat.
Um,
Um,
well, it was about the I was going to say the election and how you know a lot of the media has put out spells. A lot of
oh, right. That just spells, right. Okay, so what I know from my own experience, having worked with computers and way back 25, 30 years ago, I mean, back then, one could, uh, back then, one could actually, from a satellite, see what somebody's reading in a book. Back then, we were already hearing about experiments with, there are these guys out in Montauk, and they're all passed away now, which is really sad. But they set up this thing where they set out a beam, and it wasn't radio signals, it was some other kind of signal where they just said, call this phone number. And within a week, they started getting people ringing that phone number from places like, they were in Montauk. So they started out getting it from places like Philly and, not too far away. But within a couple of weeks, they were getting calls from down south, and out west. And that's when the FBI came along and shut them down. So clearly, there is a way to get subliminal messaging through on different beams than just radio signals.
Yeah.
And secondly, the FBI knew about it and figured it out. And this was like 30, maybe even 40 years ago. So this is out there. There is a way to send subliminal messaging, not just through the TV set or through your toaster oven. There is a way to send out signal messages just by putting out a machine that just broadcasts it.
In the ethers.
Yeah, through the ether.
Mhm.
So I think that what's happening is that all of these people that have derangement syndrome are picking up that signal, and there's something that connects them to that signal. Now, a close friend of mine said to me the other day that what she noticed is, and I agree with her, I was noticing somewhat the same thing, that everyone we know that has derangement syndrome seems to have been cut off from their spiritual connection to heaven. And they're not to say that they're bad people, not to say that they don't have spirituality within them, but you see it often in things like, it shows up when they're taking care of their pets or their children or something like that. They still have all of this capacity to love and protect and all of that. And they're still great people. It's just that one thing of the derangement syndrome sets them off.
Mhm.
And that seems to be like, the ones I know are like embarrassed about religion, embarrassed about Christianity. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about ever any kind of spirituality, anything like that.
Mhm.
Um,
And then there's also some people that have just been afraid to trust Trump because of the media. They've been, you know, they feel more comfortable with the status quo, even though it's been really,
yeah,
even though we can see life was a little bit easier. I can say a little bit, but groceries were at a lower price, gas was at a lower price a few years ago under Trump's administration.
yeah.
Things have gotten harder. There's a lot
But
more
they,
homeless
but they,
people.
they can't even see that.
Hmm.
They just hear now that it was terrible then, and then they just believe that. It's like, where are their brains?
Hmm.
Their brains are gone. When it comes to Trump, their brains are gone.
Hmm.
Anyway, let's get back to Kamala's chart because this is mind-boggling. I
Hmm.
really, it's just wait. This is going to blow your mind. Okay, so the first thing we know is that sadly we're missing Chiron in the house of the presidency and that there's a wound there. And I'm sorry we're missing it because it's at 14 degrees Pisces. And if you will recall the horary chart, oh gosh, we should probably pull that one up. Can you pull up the horary chart again for briefly?
Hmm.
Okay, I'll just start talking about it. What you will see is that the ascendant, which is the whole thing that represents the question of will she become president, is at 13 degrees Pisces. And her Chiron is at 14 degrees Pisces. And the last move in the chart, which is representative of the whole answer to the whole thing, is Jupiter. Okay, the last move in the whole chart is Jupiter, which is going to be going forward and then backwards. And then it's going to be at 14 degrees backwards in Gemini. And Saturn is going to go backwards to 14 degrees Pisces. And the ascendant is like 13 and change. It's close to 14 degrees. So you're going to have Saturn sitting on the ascendant and Jupiter, which is the representative of the ascendant, squaring Saturn. And her Chiron, her wounded healer, is also at 14 degrees Pisces. So that Saturn retrograde, which I have been calling the sword of Damocles through this whole thing, is going to hit her wounded healer in her 10th house of the presidency. And that is going to happen December 24th. And that is mind-blowing to me that that was all going to come together on actually physically come together on December 24th, this coming December. And that's going to be that is the coup de grace. That's going to be the wound that wipes her out. So let's go back to her chart. And I'm going to show you some other crazy things in her chart. Hi, come here. What's wrong? You have food? Yeah. You want to say hello? Hi. Good boy. No, it's going to be, we'll be finished soon. Okay. And then we can cut. Okay.
So that's how she will suffer,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Chiron is 14 degrees Pisces. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Everything Saturn and Jupiter are going to square each other. That's going to be Jupiter has to do with bad news. It's going to represent her, bad news about her. It's going to square her Saturn, which is going to conjunct her wounded healer. And something's going to come out that probably just crushes her somehow or other. And that's going to be December 24th. Or thereabouts. It might, it might start December 24th and manifest December 26th or 28th, but it's going to be December 24th is that's when it's going to activate. Let's put it that way. Okay, so let's take a good look at her chart. Okay, so
The 10th house is the house of presidency. So maybe we can start there.
well, the 10th house we did the Chiron. So let's move on to her intelligence.
Okay.
She has in the 5th house, she has Mercury in Scorpio. Now, Mercury in Scorpio is not a stupid person. The Mercury is, there's no debilitation, there's no fall, it's a sign where Mercury very often thrives. And interestingly enough, it's a sign where you often find people who are spies, because it is a very it's a placement for Mercury that is intelligent in and can be very secretive in their intelligence. And we look to see right next to it is her sun is in Libra, also in the 5th house. Well, what does the 5th house represent? The 5th house represents children and acting. And remember, I kept coming back to the fact that there was all of this stuff dealing with the 5th house and the sun in the 5th house in her horary chart, and it could represent acting. Well, here we have acting. And my question is, since she's really, really smart, I mean, how could anyone be as stupid as she is? How could anyone handle the word salad that she handles so brilliantly so that she continually makes herself look like an idiot? I think that that takes super intelligence to do that. And I think that when you look at the rest of her chart, we see her Neptune is in the 6th house in Scorpio. And we see down in her 4th house something that's very alarming. We see Uranus at 13 degrees down in the 4th house, which is down around at the bottom of the chart. We see Uranus, which is the red kind of mushy cross, and that's at 13 degrees Virgo. And it's right next to Pluto, which is at 15 degrees Virgo, which is right next to her Venus, which is at 17 degrees Virgo. And what we see with that, what we call it a stellium, because those 3 planets are so close together in the same sign, Uranus conjunct Venus is strong sexuality, and it can be kinky sexuality. Pluto, between the two of them, is power. And we saw how she used her sexuality to become the mistress of Willie Brown and gain power. Okay. Now, we also know that there have been some allegations that she was connected to someone who has just become famous for giving freakout parties and for filming them. And that information got taken in by the White Hats last spring when they raided his house. You know who I'm talking about. So my question is this: did they get some compromising stuff on her and say to her, here's your option? As remember, Pluto in her horary could travel through her entire 12th house of jail, 20 years. Did they say to her, look, we got an option for you. You are going to become the runner for president, and you are going to be an idiot. You are going to be the actress who makes herself look unbelievably stupid. And if you do that, we will spare you from going to jail. And I'm just wondering if that's a possibility because she has Jupiter in her 12th house at 24 degrees Taurus, um, in her house of being in jail. And that's not a good placement for Jupiter, and it's in retrograde. She could do jail time, but she might not if she ended up doing something for the White Hats. And why would she do that? Well, I really cannot conceive of anyone being as stupid as she is with a Mercury and Scorpio. It's not possible. Mercury and Scorpio is devious, intelligent, or it can be super smart and really brilliant at tactics and like a mastermind spy, but for good. It can be either. And what bothers me more than anything is this stellium in her fourth house, because Candace Owens has come out with the fact that her mom was in Canada working on testing monkeys for the MK Ultra program. And you need to actually go and watch Candace Owens' program and actually learn all about Kamala and the fact that she's not Black. She's actually Sephardic. Through her father, she's Sephardic Jew. She's Irish. The Irish were slave owners in Jamaica, and she's Indian. He says he's Brahmin Indian. Her mother was 100% Brahmin Indian, and they all identify as Caucasian, and that is not Black. And I look at these planets in her fourth house. That's the house of home. That's the house of her childhood. That's the house of at least one of her parents, either her mother or her father. And having Uranus conjunct Pluto conjunct her Venus, that's really, really difficult to live with as a child. I mean, did they experiment on her with MK Ultra?
For those who don't know, MK Ultra is part of mind programming. To control the mind is to control the people.
And they
And
use tactics that are really terrifying. And, they use all sorts of tactics like sexual abuse or uh, hitting them or just really weird stuff to torture them, to get control of their minds. And if that happened to her as a child, it would explain why Hillary Clinton wanted her to be the person who was chosen to run for president way back in 2020. Uh, it would explain why she was chosen to be vice president, because it would be assumed by the people that are in control of the MK Ultra program that she would be controllable. And if the White Hats managed to get something on her, it would be really hilarious that it would be expected that she could be controlled. So she should run for president. They set her up to do that. And then she comes out and she starts doing word salad all over the place to the point where she's creating uh, well, she's, as I said, she's literally destroying her possibility of becoming president. I just don't think anyone could take to be that brilliant at word salad like she is, unless they're really intelligent and they're acting. So that's where I'm looking at this, and something big has got to come out in December 24th. We know that it's going to happen. Oh, and here's another interesting thing. The stellium in Virgo in her fourth house of home is directly opposite her Chiron and wounded healer. So, what may come out in news is something that has to do with her past that is, say, sexually oriented, or something to do with her parents and the MK Ultra program. Something that's going to come out is going to be pretty shocking, I would suspect. And the one last thing I'm going to say about this is that if she went through this kind of stuff when she was a kid, we should all pray for her because she's had one hell of a life. She probably has identified with being Black just to stick it to her father and mother, because Brahmin Indians like have this thing about not being Black. If you go back into Indian culture, and of course, I'm serious about this. 20 years ago, Priyanka Chopra was making ads in India of using a cream to lighten the color of her skin. So were a lot of the Bollywood actors making these ads. It used to be that they would describe someone in a movie, and part of the description of somebody looking good was that their skin was light. They have, especially the Brahmin class, they really push the fact that they're Caucasian and not connected to Black Africans. So
Brahmins
what
have money over there.
was that?
Brahmins have the most money over there. They're considered the wealthiest class.
Yes, they are the top class. Yeah, the top caste in the caste system. And um, and I love Candace Owens for exposing this. And she's absolutely right. It's more despicable than blackface. It's absolutely despicable that she is not Black and she's pretending to be to try to get the Black vote. It's heinous. But then if you go back to her childhood and you see that she may have been in a bad situation with her parents, and what would be the one thing that would drive them crazy would be her being with Willie Brown, with her identifying as Black. It would be like the totally rebellious teenager. And so, you have to look at everything from a different perspective.
Mhm.
And
And
that's
not
what,
only that, she was with Willie Brown, who's 30 years older than her or so, and that kind of shows the wounding of the father and
yeah.
how you.
And that's another thing you're absolutely right, because the 10th house where she has the wounded healer Chiron, that usually represents daddy, the 10th house. And people who end up with people that are like that, 30 years older, it's sometimes they're looking for someone who's a tender, loving father figure,
Mhm.
and so yeah, my feeling is one needs to pray for her, because if she ends up doing something that actually helps Trump become president ultimately, then she will have done a good deed. And if that's the case, and I say if, I'm not sure if that's true, but if that's the case, and it may well be, looking at her private chart, her personal chart, my feeling is that we need to leave ultimate judgment for her soul up to our Father in heaven. If she's done bad deeds and needs to go to jail, then she needs to be punished. But if well, there may be extenuating circumstances because of being MK Ultra, if that's the case, which may well have been. And that looks like it was in her chart for sure. I mean, it's dark. Her chart is dark. And so my feeling is that we should really pray for her, that she reconnects to her soul and she reconnects to her spirituality, connecting to our Father in heaven. It would be a really blessed thing for her to have happen. And that's that.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep.
Thanks for
Thank
being.
you. And well, that's it.